Hey 4th grade, it's Miss Nealy. Today we are going to be talking about how to convert a fraction to a decimal and a decimal to a fraction. You've already been working on this for several weeks. I thought we would just continue in our review. So we're going to be using the same sheet from yesterday, and Miss Nealy is going to be going over 9 through 12 as guided practice, and then you'll do the rest as independent practice. So we're going to start with the fraction 5/10. I can see that it's divided into 10 equal parts. I can tell that it's divided into 10 equal parts by looking at my denominator. My denominator is my whole. It tells us what our total is partitioned into. And so I'm going to use a model where the whole is divided into that 10 parts. The numerator is going to tell us how many parts are highlighted or how many parts I'm using. In this case, I'm using 5 equal parts of the 10, so 5/10. So you can see that I'm highlighting 5 parts. Now you don't have this on your paper, however, I'm just showing you the model because we can always practice with models. So when I'm writing this in word form, I can see that I'm using tenths, so I have 5/10 if I wrote that in word form. So this is going to help me when I'm talking about place value. Since it's divided into 10 parts, I'm going to look at the tenths place. So I'm going to write my decimal point, and I'm going to put a 5 in the tenths place. I'm putting my numerator in that place value. So the place is the tenths, the value is 5/10 because I have a 5 as my numerator. Alright, let's move on to number 10. Number 10 is 83 hundredths. I know it's hundredths because my denominator says 100. So this is my total amount of parts my whole is divided into. So that's my total. It's divided into 100 parts. I can tell because I have a flat. So this is 1 flat. When I'm looking at my numerator, that 83, that's my number of parts. So I have 83 hundredths. When I say the word 83, that reminds me of the whole number 83. I could think of that like rods. I know a rod is 10 units. In this case, it's divided into 100 units, but I have 8 rods. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're going to see me here label them. So I have 8/10 really, and then that 3 is another unit. So I'm going to highlight 3 units. So I have 1, 2, 3 units. Now I'm going to write this out in word form. 83 looks like a whole number, but a fraction is a number that lies between two whole numbers. So it could be between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 99 and 100. But when I write it out in word form, I have 80-3 hundredths. So when I scroll to the top, I can use this place value chart to help me. So because this is a fraction, I know it's going to be a decimal. So I put my decimal point. And that 83, I'm just going to write it like a regular number. The only difference is instead of it being a whole number, the place has changed. So I have an 8 in the 10th place and a 3 in the 100th place. So it's 83 hundredths. It's just like the whole number 83, but I'm changing its place. Remember, we've talked about place and value. We're now looking at number 11, and I have 56 hundredths, and so I'm going to write that in my place value chart. I have a 5 in the 10th place and a 6 in the 100th place. It's ending in the 100th place, and so since it's ending in the 100th place, I know that my whole is going to be divided into 100 equal parts. So I have 100 units in my whole. So in order to make one whole, I need 100 of those units. However, instead of having 100 units, I have 56 units. So I have 56 hundredths. So I'm modeling that for you. I have 5 rods or 5 tenths, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. You can see how I represent that 50 hundredths. So I have 5 rods, and then I'm going to need to represent that 6 that's in the hundredths place. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're going to see me label it here in a second. I have 56 units total, and each of those units represent a hundredth. So I have 56 out of 100, or 56 hundredths. So that's why my denominator has become 100, and that 56, which was my decimal, becomes my numerator because that's the amount of parts I have. Now we're going to move on to number 12, and number 12 is a really cool number because it has a whole number mixed with a decimal. So I'm highlighting it blue because you're going to see in a second that I go to the top and I'm going to put that 7 in the ones place because that 7 represents a whole number because it's in the ones place. So I have 7 wholes. That decimal point 39 represents a fraction. So I have 7 and 39 hundredths because anytime we see a decimal point we say and. So that 39 hundredths is a fraction. It lives between two whole numbers. In this case, this fraction lives between 7 and 8. So when I have a whole number and a fraction, that creates a certain kind of fraction that we've talked about before. So pause the video and see if you can remember what the fraction's called. I have a whole number and a fraction together. That's called a mixed number. So I've already represented my 7 wholes up at the top in the ones place. So now when I'm looking back at my place value chart, I see 39 ends in the hundredths place. So I know that it's out of hundredths, or I have 100 units. So I'm going to have 39 as my numerator and 100 as my denominator. So your assignment today is to do 13 through 17 on that guided practice that we started yesterday. You have a word problem that you're going to have to complete. Just remember with that word problem, it's a comparison word problem. So we're comparing decimals. You actually have an anchor chart from last week in your math journal that you can look back at where I talk about lining up the decimals. I also have a video on its learning if you go back to our Unit 6 page for math. Please email me if you have any questions. I would love to help you out today. Have a great day.